For this classification, we will be doing the pop-up move. Pay special attention to the elbow movement in this move. As you can see, our elbows go from resting straight at our side to bending in the air. The elbow is a hinge joint. A hinge joint allows movement only in one direction. In addition to this, it allows angular movements. In this move, we demonstrate the anatomical movement of flexion with our elbows. According to our notes, flexion is when a joint is bending in a way that decreases the angle of the joint so the articulating bones get closer. The articulating bones in this joint are the humerus, radius, and ulna.
The next three joint classifications we will be discussing are involved with our twisties move. First up, watch the shoulders. The shoulders are a ball and socket joint. Anatomical movements within this motion in the dance include rotational movements, abduction, and extension. Rotational movements are when the bone turns on its axis. Abduction is when a limb moves away from the medial plane. Finally, extension is when a joint bends and increases the angle of the joint. The articulating bones will get further apart. Articulating bones include the scapula and humerus.
Next, rewatch the video and focus on the knees. In the dance, we use our knees, which are a hinge joint. As you can see, our knees display the anatomical movement of extension. As we explained earlier, extension is when a joint bends and increases the angle of the joint, thus causing the articulating bones to get further apart. These articulating bones include the femur, tibia, and patella.
Finally, the last joint we will be talking about for this move is the hip. The hip is a ball and socket joint. The hip displays rotational movement, flexion, and abduction. These three terms were discussed earlier. Articulating bones in the hip are the femur, pubis, ilium, and ischium.
Our next move is the Queen of the Waves move. In this move, look at the elbow as we sway our hands back and forth across our body. As mentioned earlier, the elbow is a hinge joint, and the anatomical movements within this movement include flexion, which we mentioned earlier, and extension, which is when a joint is bending in a way that increases the angle of the joint, so the articulating bones get further apart. The articulating bones that are included in this movement are the humerus, radius, and ulna.
Now we will discuss what we call the lasso move. In this move, we twist our arms around in a circle as we spin. This movement involves rotational movements, both abduction, which is moving a limb away from the median plane along the frontal plane, and adduction, which is moving a limb towards the median plane, and both flexion and extension, which we discussed earlier. The articulating bones in this joint are the scapula and the humerus.
The next move is our no crown move, where we use both our elbows and our wrists. We use our elbow when we wave our finger back and forth, thus using the pivot joint in our elbow. This movement involves rotation, supination, which is simply turning, twisting forward, and pronation, which means turning and twisting backwards. The articulating bones involved in this dance move include the humerus, radius, and ulna.
Our second no crown move involves our wrist, as we mentioned before. This move occurs when we flick our wrist away from our body, and it involves the condylar joint and the wrist. This move mainly involves extension, which we defined earlier in the video. The articulating bones in this joint are many, including the radius, scaphoid, lunate, and tricrural bones. Basically the radius of the ulnar and the carpal bones.
We have titled the next move, Some Happy Clappies. During this move, our shoulders, which are ball and socket joints, perform anatomical movements, including rotational movements, both abduction and adduction, and both flexion and extension. All of these movements have been previously covered in other movement summaries, which I'm sure you were listening intently to. Once again, our shoulder joints articulating bones include the scapula and the humerus.
The final move we will discuss is the bow down move. The bow down move involves movement in the wrist, which is a condylar joint. The wrist displays extension, which has been previously explained. Finally, our wrist articulating bones include the radius, scaphoid, lunate, and tricrural bones. In other words, articulating bones basically include the radius with the ulnar and the carpal bones.
This has been our anatomy music video and movement breakdown. Thanks for watching!
She's ready, she's steady, she's up on her feet, dancing on the water to her own kind of beat. She's in it, she's on it, she's rocking her skills, tearing up the current like a girl's got gills. Pop up, lean